There are moments in life when a voice you did not expect becomes the one that finally reaches you. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just steady, honest, and impossible to ignore. This is one of those moments. Imagine a woman who has watched greatness form slowly, painfully, quietly. A woman who has seen brilliance misunderstood, mocked, doubted, and almost broken before the world ever called it genius. When someone like that speaks, the truth carries a different weight. It is not about fame. It is not about success. It is about survival, discipline, and purpose. And when Elon Musk's mother reveals what she has learned, it does something strange. It stops being about her son. It becomes about you. She does not begin with applause or achievement. She begins with struggle. With uncertainty. With the kind of fear that visits a parent when they see their child is different and the world is not kind to difference. She speaks of a boy who did not fit in, who retreated into books, who asked questions that made adults uncomfortable, who carried a mind far ahead of his years and a heart that felt deeply the cruelty of rejection. She tells the truth that many biographies skip, that greatness does not arrive polished. It arrives awkward, lonely, and often unwanted, and here is where everything shifts for you. Because as she speaks, you realize she is not describing a billionaire. She is describing a pattern. A pattern that repeats in the lives of people who are meant for more but are not recognized early. People who feel out of place, too intense, too quiet, too strange, too ambitious, or too different. People who know, deep down, that there is something inside them that does not match the small expectations placed around them. She reveals that the hardest part was not the lack of money or stability. It was the constant pressure to make him normal. Teachers wanted him to be like other children. Society wanted him to shrink his curiosity. People wanted him to stop dreaming so loudly. And as a mother, she faced a choice many never talk about: protect your child by forcing them to fit in. Or protect their future by allowing them to stand alone. This is where the truth becomes uncomfortable. Because she admits she could not always protect him. She could not remove the pain. She could not stop the failures. She could only teach him one thing again and again: do not let the world decide who you are before you do. That sentence alone changes everything if you let it. How many times have you accepted a version of yourself that was handed to you by fear, by comparison, by rejection, by delay? She speaks of seasons when success looked impossible. When plans collapsed. When others laughed at ideas that later changed industries. She reveals that there were moments when even belief had to be rebuilt daily. Sometimes hourly. And this is the part that matters most for you. She does not romanticize struggle. She does not say pain is beautiful. She says pain is real, exhausting, and often unfair. But she also says it is not wasted when it is endured with purpose. As she continues, her voice carries a quiet authority. She explains that the world celebrates confidence, but confidence is usually born from consistency, not praise. It grows when you keep showing up after failure. When you work in silence while others seek approval. When you build discipline before you receive recognition. She reveals that what people call genius is often just persistence that refused to quit when quitting would have been reasonable. And suddenly, this truth reaches straight into your life. Because you may be in a season where nothing makes sense yet. Where effort feels invisible. Where prayers feel unanswered. Where dreams feel delayed. You might be questioning whether you misheard your calling, whether your patience is foolish, whether your waiting is pointless. Her words answer without accusing you. They say, just because it has not happened yet does not mean it is not happening. She talks about watching her son fail publicly and privately. About learning not to panic when timelines fall apart. About trusting character more than circumstances. About understanding that being early often feels like being wrong. This is a truth few are prepared for. When you are ahead of your time, support is scarce. When your vision is uncommon, validation is delayed. And when your assignment is large, preparation is long. She reveals that the greatest danger was never failure. It was discouragement. The slow erosion of belief caused by constant resistance. So she taught resilience in small ways. By modeling strength. By refusing to complain. By choosing dignity when life was undignified. By working when others rested. By believing when others doubted. And as she speaks, you realize something important. Resilience is taught more by example than by advice. This changes how you see your own environment. The people around you. The voices you listen to. The habits you repeat. She reveals that success did not come from motivation alone, but from structure. From routine. From responsibility. From doing what needed to be done even when emotions disagreed. And suddenly you understand why waiting for inspiration has kept you stuck. Because progress does not respond to feelings. It responds to commitment. She does not say her son was fearless. She says he learned to move forward despite fear. She does not say he always believed. She says he acted even when belief wavered. This is crucial for you. Because you may have been waiting to feel ready, confident, or certain. Her truth dismantles that excuse gently but firmly. Readiness often comes after obedience, not before it. Then she reveals something even deeper. She says that what sustained him most was not success, but meaning. A reason larger than applause. A mission that made sacrifice make sense. Without that, talent burns out. Intelligence collapses under pressure. Ambition turns destructive. Meaning is what allows you to endure misunderstanding without becoming bitter, and here is where it becomes personal. Because you have a reason too. A reason you may have buried under disappointment. A reason that once kept you awake at night with excitement. A reason that has been tested by delay. Her words call that reason back to the surface. They remind you that your purpose did not expire because it took longer than expected. She speaks honestly about the cost. The missed comforts. The criticism. The isolation. The years when progress was slow and the future uncertain. She does not hide the price. But she also reveals the reward is not just achievement. It is alignment. The peace of knowing you did not betray who you were meant to become. As she finishes speaking, there is no dramatic conclusion. No grand promise. Just a quiet reminder that stands taller than hype. The path that feels hardest may be the one preparing you most. The season that feels empty may be the one building your capacity. The delay that feels cruel may be protecting you from arriving unprepared, and this is why everything changes for you. Because her truth reframes your story. It tells you that you are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not foolish for believing in something unseen. You are in process. And process is uncomfortable by design. You are reminded that you do not need the world's permission to continue. You do not need applause to persist. You do not need immediate results to remain faithful to your vision. What you need is the courage to keep going quietly, consistently, and honestly. Her revelation leaves you with a final, unspoken challenge. Will you honor what is inside you even when no one understands it yet? Will you keep building when no one is watching? Will you trust that the preparation you resent today may be the reason you can handle tomorrow? Because the truth she reveals is simple, but it is not easy. Great futures are built in ordinary days by people who refuse to give up on what they cannot yet prove. And if you are still here, still listening, still hoping, then maybe this message was never about Elon Musk at all. And as the truth continues to unfold, it moves even deeper, into places most people never speak about out loud. She reveals that there were moments when silence was the loudest sound in the room. Moments when effort produced no applause, when sacrifice went unnoticed, when the only proof of progress was the quiet refusal to quit. She admits that these were the seasons that shaped everything. Not the victories, not the headlines, but the long stretches where nothing seemed to move and yet everything was being formed. She speaks about watching time test patience. About learning that urgency can destroy what patience is meant to protect. She reveals that many people rush destiny and then wonder why it collapses under pressure. What looks like delay is often insulation. Protection from arriving too early, from carrying responsibility before character is strong enough to hold it. This is where her words begin to press gently against your own life. Because you know what it feels like to be waiting while others seem to advance. You know the ache of watching doors open for people who did not work as hard, did not sacrifice as deeply, did not endure as long. And for a moment, resentment tries to take root. But her truth interrupts that feeling before it can grow. She says comparison is the thief not only of joy, but of clarity. The moment you measure your timeline against someone else's, you lose sight of what your journey is actually preparing you for. She explains that some paths are longer because they lead to heavier responsibilities. Some foundations take longer because they are meant to carry more weight. And suddenly, your waiting no longer feels like punishment. It feels like preparation. You realize that the resistance you faced may not be opposition at all, but refinement. She reveals that one of the most important lessons she learned as a mother was knowing when not to interfere. Knowing when struggle was not a threat, but a teacher. This is difficult to hear, because we want rescue. We want relief. We want clarity now. But her truth says growth rarely happens in comfort. Strength is built when you are forced to rely on something deeper than convenience. And then she says something that lingers long after the words are spoken. She says that belief is not proven by what you say when things are going well, but by what you continue to do when everything feels uncertain. That sentence settles into your spirit quietly, but firmly. Because you have been showing up even when you were tired. You have been trying even when doubt whispered that it was pointless. You have been faithful to effort even when results were slow. She speaks about discipline again, but not as punishment. As devotion. Devotion to a future version of yourself that already exists in potential. Devotion to a calling that does not yet have evidence. Devotion to becoming, not arriving. And you realize that every small decision you make daily is a vote for who you are becoming. Every time you choose consistency over comfort, you are shaping something far bigger than a moment. She reveals that success, when it finally arrives, often feels quieter than people expect. There is no sudden transformation of identity. No magical confidence that appears overnight. There is simply recognition catching up to work that has been happening for a long time. And this truth removes the pressure you've been placing on milestones. You stop chasing moments and start honoring momentum. She talks about integrity. About how shortcuts offer speed but steal stability. About how character is what sustains success when excitement fades. She reveals that the most dangerous seasons are not the hardest ones, but the ones where opportunity arrives before wisdom. And this truth protects you. It keeps you from resenting delay. It helps you understand that being overlooked can sometimes be a blessing. Her voice grows softer as she speaks about endurance. About learning to rest without quitting. About knowing the difference between pausing and surrendering. She says even the strongest people need stillness, not as escape, but as recalibration. This speaks directly to you if you have been exhausted, wondering whether rest means weakness. Her truth reframes it. Rest is not retreat. It is maintenance. she reveals that one of the greatest strengths you can develop is emotional independence. The ability to keep moving forward without constant validation. The courage to believe in your work even when applause is absent. Because applause is unpredictable, but discipline is reliable. And you begin to see why external approval has kept you unstable. It rises and falls. Purpose does not. She speaks of vision. Not the loud kind that announces itself, but the quiet kind that sustains you in private. Vision that whispers when no one is watching. Vision that does not need permission. Vision that survives disappointment. And you feel something stir again inside you. Something you thought had faded. A reminder of why you started, she reveals that the most valuable skill is not intelligence or talent, but adaptability. The willingness to learn, unlearn, and relearn. To stay curious. To stay humble. To stay open. Because the world changes quickly, but those who remain grounded in growth are never left behind. As her truth continues, it becomes clear that this message was never meant to impress you. It was meant to steady you. To anchor you in a season where clarity feels distant and certainty feels rare. Her words do not promise ease. They promise meaning. And meaning, once found, can carry you through anything. You begin to understand that you are not lost. You are being shaped. That your current chapter is not a mistake, but a necessary passage. That what feels heavy now may one day feel holy in hindsight. And the truth does not stop there. It deepens, becoming more intimate, more confronting, more honest than most people are ready for. She reveals that there were times when even strength felt fragile. When perseverance was not heroic, but simply necessary. When continuing forward did not feel brave, but instinctive, like breathing when the air feels thin. She admits that there were nights filled with worry, questions with no immediate answers, and days where faith had to exist without reassurance. This matters for you, because you may have believed that doubt disqualifies you. That uncertainty means you are not meant for what you are pursuing. Her truth dismantles that lie. She explains that doubt is not the opposite of belief. Quitting is. Doubt is often the companion of those who care deeply. It shows up when something matters enough to risk disappointment. She speaks about identity. About how dangerous it is to let circumstances name you. Failure tries to label you. Delay tries to define you. Silence tries to convince you that you are unseen. But she reveals that identity must be decided internally before it is ever confirmed externally. You become who you choose to be long before the world agrees. This hits you in a place you may not have words for. Because you have been wrestling with labels, too late, too slow, too much, not enough. And her truth gently but firmly removes them. She reminds you that labels placed by seasons are temporary. But identity rooted in purpose is permanent. she talks about responsibility. About how being gifted does not excuse you from effort. How potential unused becomes frustration. How discipline is not about restriction, but direction. She reveals that talent without structure leads to chaos, but talent with structure becomes power. And you begin to understand why things have felt scattered. Not because you lack ability, but because focus is still being refined. She reveals something few people admit, that success exposes you as much as it elevates you. That visibility magnifies both strengths and weaknesses. This is why preparation is merciful. Because arriving too early can damage what arriving late protects. And suddenly, the delays you've been resenting feel different. They feel intentional. She speaks about humility. About learning to listen. About staying teachable even when progress begins. About remembering that no one builds alone, even if the journey feels solitary at times. And you recognize that some of your isolation has not been abandonment, but separation. A narrowing of influence. A quiet pruning to make space for what truly matters. She reveals that one of the most misunderstood qualities is patience. People think patience is passive. She says patience is active endurance. It is choosing not to sabotage tomorrow because today is uncomfortable. It is holding vision steady while emotions fluctuate. And you realize how often impatience has tempted you to compromise, to settle, to walk away from something unfinished. She speaks of resilience again, but now it feels different. Less like survival, more like maturity. Resilience that knows when to push and when to pause. When to speak and when to stay silent. When to release control and when to take responsibility. This kind of resilience does not shout. It stands. She reveals that there were moments when quitting would have been applauded. When walking away would have looked wise. When persistence looked foolish. And yet, those were the moments that separated temporary relief from lasting impact. This truth meets you where you are. Especially if you have been standing at the edge of giving up, telling yourself it would be logical, justified, understandable. Her truth does not shame you. It steadies you. It says you are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to question. You are allowed to rest. But you are not required to abandon what you were built for just because the road is longer than expected. She speaks about inner alignment. About how peace does not always mean ease, but it often means honesty. Honesty about what you want. And now the truth reaches its quiet conclusion, not with noise, but with clarity. She reveals that the most important lesson was never about achievement at all. It was about becoming someone who could live with themselves, regardless of outcome. Someone who could look back without regret, knowing they honored their values even when the reward was uncertain. This, she says, is the kind of success that cannot be taken away. She speaks about perspective. About how time changes the meaning of everything. What once felt like humiliation later looks like humility learned early. What once felt like rejection later reveals itself as redirection. What once felt like loss later becomes space for something better aligned. And you realize that some of the pain you still carry may simply need time to transform into understanding. She reveals that fear never fully disappears. It only changes shape. There is fear before starting, fear during struggle, fear after success. The difference is not the absence of fear, but the presence of courage shaped by experience. And you recognize yourself here. You have been braver than you give yourself credit for. You have continued despite fear, not because you lacked it. She talks about trust. Not blind optimism, but grounded trust built on consistency. Trust that effort compounds. Trust that character matters. Trust that truth eventually surfaces. Trust that what is meant for you cannot miss you if you keep showing up as who you are meant to become. This kind of trust does not rush. It does not panic. It moves steadily forward. She reveals that legacy is not built in one lifetime moment, but in thousands of ordinary choices. How you treat people when no one is watching. How you speak to yourself in failure. How you respond when things do not go your way. These are the moments that shape who you become far more than public wins ever will. This lands deeply for you, because you have been measuring yourself by outcomes instead of growth. By milestones instead of maturity. By speed instead of direction. Her truth gently resets your compass. It reminds you that forward is still forward, even when it is slow. She admits that there were times she did not know how the story would end. Times when faith was not certainty, but willingness to keep going without guarantees. And this is perhaps the most freeing truth of all. You do not need to know exactly how everything will work out. You only need to stay honest, committed, and open to learning along the way. She speaks about letting go. Letting go of bitterness. Letting go of the need to be understood by everyone. Letting go of timelines that were never yours to control. Letting go of past versions of yourself that no longer fit who you are becoming. And you feel the weight lighten slightly. Because holding on has been exhausting, she reveals that growth often requires grief. Grief for old dreams that evolved. Grief for relationships that could not follow you forward. Grief for expectations that had to be released. But she says this grief is not failure. It is transition. And transitions, though uncomfortable, are evidence of movement. She reminds you that you are allowed to change your mind, refine your vision, adjust your path, without abandoning your purpose. Flexibility does not mean weakness. It means wisdom. And you realize that adapting does not erase your calling, it sharpens it. As her truth settles fully, there is one final realization that stays with you. You are not waiting for life to begin. Life is already happening in the discipline, in the patience, in the unseen effort, in the quiet resilience you practice every day. The becoming is not a delay. It is the destination, and so everything changes, not because the world suddenly notices you, but because you notice yourself differently. You stop asking, "When will it happen?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming while I wait?" You stop doubting your worth based on timing and start trusting your growth based on consistency. You understand now that this message was never meant to promise fame, wealth, or instant transformation. It was meant to give you something far more valuable: steadiness. The kind of steadiness that allows you to keep building, keep learning, keep growing, even when the path is unclear. And if you carry this truth forward, quietly, faithfully, patiently, then one day you will look back and realize that the season you thought was holding you back was actually the one that prepared you most. Not everything has to change overnight. You just have to keep going, and that changes everything.